There is a language being spoken around you right now that you have never been taught to hear. It has no words. It has no grammar. It has no alphabet. And yet, it is the most powerful form of communication that exists between human beings. It is older than any spoken tongue. It is more honest than any confession. And it determines, with surgical, merciless precision, who wins and who loses in every relationship you will ever have. This language is the invisible game. And you, right now, in this very moment, are fluent in it without knowing it. You speak it every time you enter a room. You speak it every time you hold someone's gaze a second too long or look away a second too soon. You speak it when you laugh at a joke that is not funny because the person telling it has power over you. You speak it when you check your phone in the middle of a conversation because the person in front of you does not hold your respect. You speak it in the space between your words, in the weight of your silence, in the rhythm of your breathing when someone unexpected walks through the door. You have been speaking this language your entire life, but no one ever told you what you were saying, until now. Niccolò Machiavelli dedicated his existence to decoding this language. 5 centuries ago, in the candlelit corridors of Florence, he watched men destroy empires not with armies, but with a single well-timed silence. He watched alliances shatter not through betrayal, but through a shift in posture at a banquet table. He watched princes rise to absolute power, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they understood something that their rivals refused to accept. That the visible world, the world of words, promises, handshakes, and declarations, is a theater. And behind that theater, invisible strings control every actor on the stage. Those strings are what this video will expose. I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not entertainment. This is not background noise for your commute. This is an intervention. If you absorb what is contained in the next hour, you will walk away with an understanding of human behavior that most people acquire only after decades of painful experience, if they acquire it at all. You will see patterns that have been shaping your life since childhood. You will understand why certain people seem to effortlessly command rooms while you work twice as hard for half the recognition. You will finally comprehend why the relationships that should have worked did not. Why the people you trusted most were the ones who diminished you. And why your kindness, your beautiful, genuine, well-intentioned kindness, has been used as a weapon against you by people who never deserved it. This is not pessimism. This is liberation. Because the moment you see the invisible game clearly, it loses its power to control you, and you gain the power to control it. Let me tell you a story, not a historical anecdote, not a parable from ancient Rome, a story about a person exactly like you. This person wakes up every morning and goes to work. They are competent. More than competent, they are talented. They arrive early, they stay late. They produce results that exceed expectations. And yet, somehow, they watch as colleagues with half their skill and a fraction of their dedication climb past them. Promotions go to people who seem to do less, but are seen doing more. Credit for their ideas appears in someone else's presentation. Their contributions are acknowledged with a nod, but rewarded with nothing. This person comes home to a relationship that once burned with passion, but now simmers with quiet resentment. They give and give, their time, their energy, their emotional labor, and receive less and less in return. They have become the reliable one, the predictable one, the one who will always be there. And because they will always be there, they are no longer valued for being there. They have become furniture, functional, expected, and invisible. This person has friends who call them only when they need something, who cancel plans without guilt, who take their loyalty for granted because it has never been withdrawn, not once, not ever, regardless of how poorly it was reciprocated. This person lies awake at night, wondering what is wrong with them, why their effort never translates to reward, why their love never generates the love they deserve, why they feel, despite doing everything right, like they are perpetually losing a game whose rules they were never given. That person may be you. And if it is, I want you to hear this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not insufficient. You're not cursed with bad luck or surrounded by uniquely terrible people. You are simply playing the wrong game. You have been playing the visible game, the game of effort, transparency, and unconditional giving. The game where you show up, do the work, open your heart, and trust that the universe will reward you proportionally. And in the visible game, those are winning strategies. But the visible game is not the real game. The visible game is the surface, the polished floor of a ballroom beneath which an entirely different architecture supports every step, every turn, every dance. The real game, the invisible game, operates on a completely different set of principles. And those principles do not care about your effort, your transparency, or your good heart. They care about one thing and one thing only: the management of perception. Machiavelli understood this with a clarity that was centuries ahead of his time. He wrote in The Prince that the gap between how people live and how they ought to live is so wide that anyone who ignores what is actually done in favor of what should be done learns their destruction rather than their preservation. Read that again. He is not saying that idealism is noble but impractical. He is saying that idealism, applied blindly, is self-destructive. And that is exactly what has been happening to you. Your idealism, your belief that honesty should be rewarded, that effort should be recognized, that love should be reciprocated, has not been serving you. It has been consuming you, burning you from the inside like a fuel that produces light for everyone else while leaving you in darkness. The invisible game does not operate on fairness. It operates on dynamics, power dynamics, perception dynamics, the dynamics of scarcity, mystery, and strategic positioning. And until you understand these dynamics, you will continue to produce extraordinary effort for ordinary results, while watching others produce ordinary effort for extraordinary results. This is not bitterness speaking. This is mathematics. The mathematics of human interaction, calculated not in numbers, but in the currency of attention, respect, and influence. So let us begin the real education, the one you were never given, the one that Machiavelli encoded in his writings for those with the courage to read between the lines. The foundation of the invisible game rests on a single, uncomfortable truth. Human beings do not see reality. They see projections. Every person you interact with, your boss, your partner, your closest friend, is not responding to who you are. They are responding to the image of you that exists in their mind. And that image is constructed not from your intentions, not from your inner qualities, not from the full complexity of your character, but from a tiny fraction of observable signals that your behavior broadcasts every moment of every day. Your posture when you enter a room, the speed at which you respond to a message, the frequency of your laughter, the steadiness of your eye contact, the way you handle interruption, the way you handle praise, the way you handle silence. These micro-signals, most of which you have never consciously controlled, are building your reputation, shaping your relationships, and determining your position in every social hierarchy you belong to. And here is the devastating part. The image these signals create often has almost nothing to do with who you actually are. The most generous person in the room can be perceived as desperate if their generosity lacks boundaries. The most intelligent person at the table can be perceived as insecure if they over-explain their ideas. The most loving partner in the relationship can be perceived as suffocating if their love comes without restraint or calibration. Perception does not care about your truth. Perception cares about your presentation. And in the invisible game, presentation is not vanity. It is survival. Machiavelli was not the cold, calculating villain that popular culture has made him. He was a diagnostician. He looked at the body of human society, identified its diseases, and prescribed treatments that were effective rather than pleasant. When he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both, he was not celebrating cruelty. He was acknowledging a clinical observation, that fear produces consistent behavior, while love produces unreliable behavior, and that a ruler who depends on the unreliable will eventually be destroyed by it. Translate this into your personal world. The people who treat you best are not always the ones who love you most. They are the ones who respect you most. And respect, unlike love, is not given freely. Respect is earned through the signals you send, signals of self-possession, of boundaries, of the quiet implication that your presence in someone's life is a choice, not a necessity. When someone respects you, they are careful with you. They consider their words before speaking. They honor your time. They recognize your boundaries, not because they are afraid of you, but because they perceive you as someone whose attention and approval carry weight. And that perception, that carefully constructed, strategically maintained perception, is the product of the invisible game played well. When someone merely loves you without respecting you, they are careless with you. They assume your forgiveness. They test your patience. They push your boundaries incrementally, not out of malice, but out of the subconscious recognition that there will be no consequence. Because you have taught them, through your unconditional availability, that your love is guaranteed regardless of their behavior. This is the core mechanism of the invisible game in relationships. The signals you send determine the treatment you receive, not your words, not your intentions, not the depth of your feelings, your signals. And the most powerful signal you can send is the signal of sovereignty, the signal that says, I am complete without you. I choose to be here, but I do not need to be here. I value this relationship, but I will not sacrifice my dignity to maintain it. My presence is a gift, not a guarantee, and gifts, by their very nature, can be withdrawn. This signal does not require words. In fact, words often weaken it. It is communicated through the way you carry yourself, the way you manage your time, the way you respond, or choose not to respond, to the 1,000 small tests that every relationship presents. Because make no mistake, you are being tested, constantly, not maliciously, not consciously, but inevitably. Every relationship contains a continuous, subconscious negotiation of power and position. And the way you respond to these tests, the micro moments where someone pushes a boundary, ignores a need, takes a liberty, determines your position in the invisible hierarchy for months and years to come. Most people fail these tests without knowing they were being tested. They laugh off disrespect because confrontation is uncomfortable. They accept cancellations without consequence because they fear appearing demanding. They tolerate small betrayals because addressing them feels petty. And each failed test, each moment of unchallenged boundary violation, sends the same devastating signal. I will accept whatever you give me because I am afraid of what happens if I do not. That signal, repeated over days and weeks and years, does not inspire love. It inspires contempt. Not the sharp, dramatic contempt of open hostility, but the slow, quiet contempt of someone who has learned that you will never hold them accountable, that you will always be there, that your loyalty is not a treasure to be earned, but a commodity to be consumed. Machiavelli saw this dynamic play out in the courts of Italy with devastating regularity. Princes who tolerated disrespect from their nobles in the name of peace found themselves facing rebellion. Not despite their tolerance, but because of it. Because tolerance without boundaries is not perceived as strength. It is perceived as weakness, and weakness in the invisible game does not inspire gratitude. It inspires predation. You may be thinking, but I am not a prince. I am not navigating the politics of Renaissance Italy. I am just trying to live my life, maintain my relationships, build my career, and that is exactly the point. Because the dynamics Machiavelli described are not unique to palaces and parliaments. They are universal. They operate in your office, in your living room, in your group chat, in your bedroom. The scale changes. The mechanics do not. The invisible game does not care about your context. It cares about your signals. And right now, today, in this very moment of your life, you are sending signals that either elevate you or diminish you. Signals that either command respect or invite exploitation. Signals that either attract people toward you or teach them that you can be safely ignored. The question is, which signals are you sending? If you have stayed with me this far, something in you already knows the answer. Something in you has recognized the pattern. The chronic underappreciation, the slow erosion of reciprocity, the feeling, vague but persistent, that you are giving more than you are receiving, and that no amount of additional giving seems to change the equation. That recognition is the first crack in the old architecture, the first moment of seeing the invisible game for what it is. And from this crack, everything else will follow. What comes next will take you deeper into the mechanics of the invisible game. We will explore the specific laws that govern it, the principles that determine who holds power and who surrenders it in every human interaction. These are not abstract theories. These are operational truths that you can begin applying immediately, in every conversation, every relationship, every room you walk into. Machiavelli did not write for comfort. He wrote for transformation. And transformation requires the willingness to abandon what is familiar in favor of what is true. Are you willing? Then stay with me. The architecture of the invisible game is about to be revealed, and once you see it, you will never again wonder why your life feels the way it does. You will know, and knowing, in the invisible game, is the first form of power. The first law of the invisible game will sound simple when you hear it. Do not be deceived by that simplicity. The greatest truths are always dressed in plain clothes. They do not arrive with fanfare and complexity. They arrive quietly, and then they rearrange everything. Here it is. In every human interaction, the person who is more willing to walk away holds more power. Not the person who is smarter. Not the person who is more attractive. Not the person who is richer, louder, more articulate or more experienced. The person who is more willing to walk away. Because willingness to walk away communicates something that no other signal can. I do not need this more than you do. And in the invisible game, that single signal, the signal of non-dependence, reshapes the entire dynamic. Machiavelli observed this with brutal clarity. He noted that in every negotiation between city-states, the party that could afford to refuse the deal always secured better terms. Not because they were stronger militarily, not because they had better negotiators, but because their willingness to say no, their genuine, demonstrated capacity to exist without the agreement, created a pressure that the other side could not resist. This principle operates identically in your relationships. Think about the last time someone had power over you emotionally. A partner, a friend, a colleague whose opinion you valued too much. In every case, the power they held was not intrinsic to them. It was created by your unwillingness to walk away, by your attachment to the outcome, by your visible, palpable need for the relationship to continue on its current terms. The moment you became willing to walk away, truly willing, not as a bluff, but as a genuine internal position, the dynamic would have shifted immediately. Not because walking away is always the right choice, but because the willingness to do so changes your entire energetic signature. It changes your posture, your voice, your eye contact, the speed of your responses, the weight of your words. It changes everything without you having to do anything different. because the invisible game reads intention, not action. This is why ultimatums delivered from desperation never work. But boundaries stated from wholeness always do. The words might be identical. The intention behind them is not. And the invisible game, which is infinitely more sophisticated than conscious thought, reads that intention with perfect accuracy. Machiavelli called this virtù. Not virtue in the moral sense, but the quality of strength and readiness that allows a person to act decisively when circumstances demand it. A prince with virtue does not beg for peace. He prepares for war while being open to peace. And that preparation, that readiness to engage the most difficult option, is precisely what makes peace more likely. Because the adversary, sensing that readiness, understands that cooperation is not being requested from weakness, but offered from strength. You must develop your own version of virtù, not military strength, but personal sovereignty. The deep, quiet knowledge that you will be fine, regardless of what any single person does. That your happiness, your identity, your sense of worth, does not depend on any one relationship, any one job, any one person's approval. This is not arrogance. This is architecture. You are building an internal structure that cannot be toppled by external withdrawal. And when you have that structure, when it is genuine, when it is felt in your bones rather than performed with your words, the invisible game responds to you differently. People feel it. They cannot name it, but they feel it. There is something in your presence that says, I choose to be here. And that choice, because it is perceived as free rather than forced, makes your presence infinitely more valuable. The second law of the invisible game is this. People do not remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel about themselves. This sounds like a platitude until you understand its strategic implications. Because most people, when they want to be liked, focus on being impressive. They talk about their achievements, their knowledge, their experiences. They try to demonstrate value by broadcasting it directly, and the invisible game punishes this approach ruthlessly. Because the person who talks about themselves constantly does not make others feel important. They make others feel like an audience. And no one, not a single human being on this planet, wants to be an audience in a relationship. They want to be a participant. They want to feel that their presence matters, that their thoughts are valued, that the person across from them is genuinely interested in who they are. Machiavelli understood this as the art of creating loyalty through perceived attention. He noted that the most successful princes were not the ones who gave the most lavish gifts. They were the ones who made each subject feel individually noticed. A word of recognition at the right moment. A question that showed genuine awareness of someone's situation. A pause. A deliberate, unhurried pause that communicated, I am fully here with you right now. These micro-gestures of focused attention created bonds that no amount of gold could buy. In your life, this translates into a specific skill, the ability to make someone feel like the most important person in the room through the quality of your attention, not the quantity of your words. You do not achieve this by flattering people. Flattery is transparent, and it creates suspicion rather than loyalty. You achieve it by listening with genuine curiosity, by asking questions that show you have been paying attention to the details of their life, by remembering things they said weeks ago and referencing them naturally in conversation, by giving them the one thing that almost no one gives anymore in our distracted, notification-saturated world, your undivided, complete, uninterrupted presence. When you master this, something remarkable happens. People begin to gravitate toward you, not because you are the most impressive person in their world, but because they feel most impressive when they are with you. And that feeling, that quiet elevation of self that your attention provides, creates a bond that is deeper, more durable, and more strategically valuable than anything your achievements alone could generate. This is not manipulation. This is the highest form of social intelligence. It is the recognition that human beings are, at their core, creatures who need to feel seen. And the person who provides that feeling, consistently, genuinely, with skill and intention, holds a form of power that is almost impossible to compete with. The third law builds on the first two and introduces the concept that separates the merely aware from the truly masterful, emotional sovereignty. Emotional sovereignty is the ability to determine your own internal state regardless of external circumstances. It is not the suppression of emotion, it is not coldness or detachment, it is the capacity to feel fully anger, sadness, desire, frustration, without allowing those feelings to dictate your behavior. It is the space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl wrote about, the space where freedom lives. In the invisible game, emotional sovereignty is your ultimate armor, because the game's most effective weapon is provocation. People will test your composure, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, to determine where your breaking point is. And once they find it, they have found the lever that controls you. Think about the person in your life who can most easily upset you. The one whose words cut deepest. The one who knows exactly which buttons to push to send you spiraling into anger or anxiety or self-doubt. That person holds power over you not because they are powerful, but because you have shown them your triggers. You have demonstrated, through repeated emotional reactions, exactly which strings to pull. And they pull them whenever they need to redirect the dynamic in their favor. Machiavelli warned about this with particular intensity. He wrote that a prince who was easily provoked was a prince who was easily controlled. Because provocation is not an attack. It is a diagnostic tool. It is a test designed to map your emotional landscape. And every time you react predictably, you are handing the map to someone who may not have your best interests at heart. Emotional sovereignty is the process of taking that map back, not by becoming unfeeling, but by becoming uncontrollable, by creating a gap between what you feel and what you show, by choosing, with deliberate awareness, which emotions to express and which to process internally, by responding to provocation, not with the reaction the provocateur expects, but with a calm that makes them question whether their provocation had any effect at all. This is not easy. It is, in fact, one of the hardest skills a human being can develop, because our emotional reactions are deeply wired, conditioned by years of habit, and reinforced by a culture that celebrates emotional authenticity as the highest form of honesty. But emotional authenticity and emotional sovereignty are not opposites. They are partners. The emotionally sovereign person is deeply authentic. They feel everything, but they choose how, when, and to whom they express what they feel. Their authenticity is curated not for deception, but for impact. They share their vulnerability with people who have earned the right to see it. They express their anger in moments when anger will produce change rather than chaos. They reveal their desires at times when revelation will create connection rather than leverage. This is mastery, and it terrifies people who have grown accustomed to reading you like an open book. The fourth law concerns the architecture of mystery. Human beings are fundamentally driven by curiosity. We are wired to investigate, to explore, to solve. And this wiring extends to our relationships. We are most drawn to the people we do not fully understand, the ones who carry an element of the unknown, the ones who reveal themselves in layers rather than in floods. Most people, in their eagerness to connect, destroy their own mystery before the other person has a chance to develop genuine curiosity. They share their entire history on a first date. They explain every decision, every feeling, every thought process in exhaustive detail. They mistake total transparency for intimacy, and in doing so, they eliminate the very quality that would have made the other person want to know more. Mystery is not deception, it is pacing. It is the understanding that revelation, like all powerful things, is most effective when it is delivered gradually. A story told all at once is an anecdote. A story revealed over time is an obsession. And in the invisible game, the ability to pace your self-revelation, to share enough to create connection while withholding enough to sustain interest, is one of the most potent tools available to you. Machiavelli understood this at the level of statecraft. He observed that princes who revealed their full strategies to their courts lost the element of surprise. And surprise, he argued, was one of the few advantages that could not be countered by superior force. A prince whose moves were predictable was a prince who could be outmaneuvered. But a prince who maintained strategic ambiguity, who let his allies and enemies alike wonder about his next move, held a form of power that multiplied everything else in his arsenal. In your relationships, strategic ambiguity does not mean being evasive or dishonest. It means being comfortable with the fact that not everyone needs to know everything about you. It means answering questions with depth rather than breadth, sharing genuinely about a specific topic rather than scattering shallow information across every aspect of your life. It means having a rich inner world that you protect not out of secrecy, but out of self-respect. Because your inner world is sacred territory, and sacred territory is not open for unrestricted tourism. When you carry mystery, people lean in. They ask more questions. They think about you when you are not there. They construct narratives about the parts of you they cannot see. And those narratives, colored by their own fascination, are almost always more compelling than the reality you would have offered if you had simply told them everything from the start. This is the architecture of attraction in the invisible game. Not tricks, not techniques, but the strategic management of revelation and concealment, of presence and absence, of speaking and silence. Now let me show you how these 4 laws, willingness to walk away, the primacy of how you make others feel, emotional sovereignty, and the architecture of mystery, interact in the 3 arenas that define your daily existence. In the professional arena, these laws combine to create what I call executive presence. Not the corporate buzzword, but the genuine article. Executive presence is what happens when a person walks into a professional environment carrying all 4 laws simultaneously. They do not need the job more than the job needs them, or at least they carry themselves as if that is the case. They focus their attention on making others feel competent and valued, creating loyalty and alliance without ever appearing to seek it. They maintain emotional sovereignty under pressure, responding to criticism and challenge with the composure that signals deep competence. And they carry enough mystery, enough strategic depth and unexplored dimension that their colleagues and superiors never feel they have the complete picture. This combination is magnetic in professional settings. It is the quality that makes certain people seem destined for leadership, not because they seek it aggressively, but because they embody it naturally. In personal relationships, these 4 laws create what can only be called emotional weight. The person who embodies them is not the loudest in the relationship. They are not the most dramatic, the most expressive, or the most obviously passionate. But they are the one whose opinions carry the most significance, whose approval means the most, whose withdrawal would be felt the deepest. Because their presence is a choice, a visible, palpable, daily choice. And that quality of chosen presence gives every interaction a gravity that obligated presence cannot match. In social settings, these laws create an aura that others experience as charisma. But it is not the charisma of performance, the loud, attention-seeking energy that fills a room with noise. It is the charisma of depth, the quiet magnetism of someone who is fully present, fully composed, genuinely interested in others, and fundamentally unpredictable. People are drawn to this quality because it is rare. In a world of oversharing, overreacting, and over-explaining, the person who listens more than they speak responds more than they react, and reveals less than they contain is not just unusual, they are irresistible. But knowing these laws is only half the equation. The other half, the half that separates understanding from mastery, is knowing how to deploy them in the specific situations that matter most. The moments of conflict, of temptation, of pressure. The moments when the invisible game is being played at its highest stakes and the margin between winning and losing is measured in heartbeats. That is precisely what we explore next. The tactical manual of the invisible game. The specific moves, responses, and strategies that will transform these principles from abstract understanding into lived practice. The coldest, most effective plays in the invisible game await you. And they will change not just how you interact with others, but how others interact with you, permanently. Stay with me. The most important part is coming. Now we leave the realm of theory and enter the arena where the invisible game is played in real time. Every principle you have learned means nothing if you cannot execute it in the moment that matters. The moment when someone tests you, when a conversation turns, when the balance of power shifts beneath your feet and you have a fraction of a second to decide how you will respond. This is where mastery lives, not in understanding but in execution. The first tactical application concerns the most common battlefield you will face, the moment of disrespect. It arrives in 1,000 forms. The colleague who interrupts you in a meeting, the partner who dismisses your feelings with a joke, the friend who cancels on you for the 3rd time without apology, the stranger who cuts in front of you and meets your eyes with a look that dares you to say something. Most people respond to disrespect in one of 2 predictable ways, and both are losing moves. The first is immediate confrontation. They escalate. They raise their voice. They demand recognition. They turn the moment into a conflict. And while they believe they are defending their dignity, what they are actually doing is revealing how deeply the disrespect affected them. They are announcing to the room that they can be destabilized by a comment, an interruption, a dismissive glance. In the invisible game, that announcement is a catastrophic loss of position. The second common response is silence. Not strategic silence, defeated silence. The silence of someone who absorbed the disrespect and swallowed it because confrontation was too frightening. This silence does not communicate strength. It communicates submission. And submission, once established, becomes the expected pattern. The disrespect will be repeated, escalated, normalized. The strategic response is neither of these. It is the art of the delayed acknowledgement. Here is how it works. When someone disrespects you, you do not react immediately. You register the moment. You let it land. And then, this is critical, you continue with whatever you were doing as if the interruption was so insignificant that it barely registered. If you were speaking, you pause briefly, then continue your point. If you were in the middle of an activity, you complete it. You do not rush. You do not show agitation. You let the silence after their disrespect hang in the air for exactly as long as it takes to become uncomfortable. For them, not for you. Then, later, minutes later, hours later, sometimes even days later, depending on the severity and context, you address it. But not in the way they expect. Not with anger. Not with hurt. Not with accusation. With observation. Calm, detached, almost clinical observation. In a professional setting, this might sound like, I noticed something in our last meeting that I want to address directly. When I was presenting the framework, there was an interruption that redirected the conversation. I want to make sure the team has the full picture. Let me walk through the rest of my analysis. No blame, no emotion, no defensiveness, just a quiet, authoritative correction that accomplishes 3 things simultaneously. It demonstrates that you noticed the disrespect. It shows that you chose not to react emotionally, and it reclaims the conversational territory that was taken from you. In a personal relationship, it might sound like, "I want to mention something. When we were with your friends on Saturday, there was a comment about my work that was framed as a joke. I did not react at the time because the setting was not right, but I want you to know that I noticed it, and I want you to understand that my work is not material for entertainment." Again, calm, specific, and delivered from a position of strength rather than pain. Machiavelli would have called this the principle of delayed response. He observed that princes who reacted immediately to every slight were perceived as impulsive and insecure, while princes who addressed offenses on their own timeline, when the moment was strategically advantageous, were perceived as calculated and formidable. The delay itself is the message. It says, "I do not operate on your schedule. I do not dance when you whistle. I address things when I choose to address them, and that choice is mine alone." The second tactical application concerns a scenario that nearly everyone faces, but almost no one handles well. The moment when someone tries to extract information from you that you do not want to share. This happens constantly. A colleague probes about your salary, your career plans, your opinion about a controversial decision. A friend asks about your relationship in ways that feel more like surveillance than care. A family member interrogates you about choices that are none of their business. The untrained response is either full disclosure, which surrenders information and therefore power, or obvious evasion, which creates suspicion and damages trust. Neither serves you. The strategic response is what intelligence professionals call the bridge. You acknowledge the question, validate the questioner's interest, and then redirect the conversation to territory of your choosing. The key is that the bridge must feel natural, not evasive. It must leave the questioner feeling satisfied, or at least respected, without you having actually provided the information they sought. Here is a concrete example. Someone asks, "So, are you looking at other job opportunities?" The untrained person either says yes, revealing their dissatisfaction and giving the other person ammunition, or says no, which may be a lie that can later damage their credibility. The strategic response. I am always paying attention to where I can have the most impact. Right now, I am focused on the challenges in front of me. What made you ask? Notice what happened. The question was acknowledged, but not answered. The response was honest without being informative. And the redirect, "What made you ask?" shifts the dynamic entirely, turning you from the interrogated into the interrogator. This technique works because it respects the social contract. You are not refusing to engage. You are not being hostile or secretive. You are simply managing the flow of information with precision. And precision, in the invisible game, is the mark of someone who has earned their position at the table. The third tactical application is one of the most psychologically potent: the art of creating productive discomfort. Most people are addicted to harmony. They will sacrifice truth, boundaries, and self-respect to maintain a surface-level peace. They agree when they disagree. They smile when they are hurt. They accommodate when they should confront. And they mistake this absence of friction for the presence of connection. The master of the invisible game understands that productive discomfort, the willingness to allow a moment of tension to exist without immediately resolving it, is one of the most powerful tools for building genuine, deep relationships. Here is why. When you allow discomfort to exist, you communicate several things at once. First, you communicate that you are not afraid of conflict. This alone distinguishes you from the vast majority of people who will do almost anything to avoid the sensation of interpersonal tension. Second, you communicate that you value truth more than comfort. And while this may cause short-term unease, it generates long-term respect that is nearly indestructible. Third, you create a space where genuine issues can be addressed rather than buried. And buried issues, as anyone who has watched a relationship slowly corrode from within can tell you, are far more destructive than confronted ones. In practice, productive discomfort looks like this. You are in a conversation with a friend who has been subtly competing with you, downplaying your achievements, one-upping your stories, redirecting attention toward themselves. Instead of laughing it off, instead of pretending you do not notice, instead of matching their behavior with your own competitive display, you simply pause. You let the most recent instance of their behavior sit in the air. You do not call it out. You do not address it. You just let the silence that follows their comment extend a beat longer than normal. That silence does more work than any confrontation could. Because in that silence, the other person becomes aware, perhaps for the first time, that their behavior has been noticed, that it has been registered, that it has not been accepted as normal. And that awareness, created without a single word of accusation, often produces a self-correction that no verbal confrontation could achieve. Machiavelli understood productive discomfort as a tool of governance. He noted that the most effective rulers were not the ones who resolved every tension immediately, but the ones who allowed certain tensions to exist strategically, letting rival factions feel the weight of their competition, letting ambitious subordinates feel the uncertainty of their position, letting potential enemies wonder whether the prince was aware of their scheming. This managed discomfort kept everyone alert, engaged, and slightly off balance. And an off-balance adversary is an adversary who cannot strike effectively. The fourth tactical application deals with perhaps the most emotionally charged scenario in the invisible game, the moment when someone you care about begins to pull away. This happens in romantic relationships, in friendships, even in professional mentorships. Someone who was once attentive becomes distant. Someone who used to seek your company now makes excuses. The energy shifts. The warmth cools. And you feel it. That slow, creeping dread of abandonment that makes you want to pursue, to question, to cling. The untrained person responds to pulling away with exactly the behavior that accelerates it. They text more. They call more. They suggest plans with increasing frequency. They ask, "Is everything okay?" With a tone that communicates not concern, but desperation. And each of these actions, each of these attempts to close the distance, pushes the other person further away. Because pursuit, when the other person is withdrawing, does not communicate love. It communicates need. And need, as we have established, is the invisible game's most devastating vulnerability. The strategic response to someone pulling away is the most counterintuitive and the most effective. You mirror their withdrawal, not in punishment, not in anger, not as a game or a manipulation, but as an honest recalibration of your investment to match theirs. If they text less, you text less. If they make less effort, you make less effort. If they pull away, you let them. And here is what is crucial. You fill the space they have vacated, not with anxiety, but with activity. You invest the time and energy that was flowing toward them into yourself, into your work, into your other relationships, into the pursuits and passions that existed before this person entered your life and will continue to exist if they leave it. This is not strategy disguised as indifference. This is genuine self-investment, and its effect on the dynamic is almost alchemical. Because the person who was pulling away, who expected pursuit, who anticipated your desperate attempts to close the distance, encounters something they did not expect. Your composure, your fullness, your refusal to collapse into neediness because one person shifted their attention. And that encounter stops them. It forces them to reconsider. Because the person they were pulling away from, the predictable, available, always there person, has suddenly become someone different. Someone who has a life beyond the relationship. Someone whose world does not revolve around a single point. Someone who is, unexpectedly and compellingly, complete without them. This does not guarantee they will return. Nothing guarantees anything in human relationships. But it does guarantee something equally important: your dignity, your self-respect, your refusal to participate in a dynamic where your value decreases the more you invest. And if the person does return, if their withdrawal was a test, a phase, or a moment of confusion, they return to someone they respect more, not less. Someone whose presence they understand is earned, not owed. Machiavelli wrote about this in the context of alliances between states. He observed that the prince who chased alliances was seen as weak and was offered unfavorable terms. But the prince who maintained his own strength and let potential allies come to him was seen as desirable and was courted with generous conditions. The principle is identical. The party that chases loses position. The party that maintains its center attracts. Now, there are critical errors that you must avoid, errors that even people who understand these principles frequently make. The first error is performing these tactics without internal alignment. If you mirror someone's withdrawal while internally panicking, the invisible game will detect the mismatch. Your body language will betray you. Your voice will carry a tension that your words deny. And the other person, reading these signals with the subconscious fluency that all human beings possess, will sense the performance. And a performance of strength is worse than honest vulnerability because it adds deception to weakness. These principles must be internalized, not performed. They must come from a genuine place of self-worth, not from a manual of tactics applied mechanically. The person who practices strategic withdrawal, because they have genuinely invested in building a life that does not depend on one relationship, is compelling. The person who practices strategic withdrawal as a technique to get someone's attention back is pathetic. The behavior is identical. The invisible game reads the intention beneath it with perfect clarity. The second error is applying these principles universally when they should be applied selectively. Not every relationship is a chess match. Not every interaction requires strategic navigation. There are moments, intimate moments, moments of shared grief, moments of spontaneous joy, where the appropriate response is not strategy, but surrender. Where the most powerful thing you can do is drop every guard, every calculation, every technique, and simply be present with another human being in the fullness of shared experience. The master of the invisible game knows when to play and when to pause. They know that strategic awareness is a tool, not a prison. They know that the purpose of understanding power dynamics is not to weaponize every interaction, but to navigate the ones that require navigation while preserving the ones that require nothing but authenticity. The third error is becoming isolated. These principles, taken to extremes, can lead to a kind of fortress mentality, a pattern of perpetual distance, perpetual guardedness, perpetual strategic calculation that protects you from exploitation but also prevents genuine connection. And a life without genuine connection, no matter how powerful or respected you may be, is a life that has missed its own point. Machiavelli himself was deeply social, deeply passionate, deeply engaged with the world. His strategic mind did not prevent him from forming deep friendships, from falling in love with abandon, from laughing and arguing and living with full intensity. His understanding of the invisible game did not make him cold. It made him free, free to choose when to be guarded and when to be open, free to love with full awareness rather than blind hope, free to give his trust deliberately rather than distributing it automatically. That freedom is what I want for you. Not the cold perfection of a person who never makes a mistake, never gets hurt, never gives too much. But the warm intelligence of a person who understands the game, who can play it when necessary, and who can set it aside when something more important is happening. And something more important is always happening. Beneath the strategies and the power dynamics and the careful calibrations, there are human beings trying to connect, trying to be seen, trying to be loved, And the person who can navigate the invisible game while never losing sight of that fundamental truth is not just a strategist. They are something much rarer, a complete human being. This is the edge you are developing right now. The edge of understanding without cynicism, of awareness without paranoia, of strategy without coldness. And it is almost complete. The final chapter will bring everything together, the laws, the tactics, the warnings, into a single, unified understanding that will serve you for the rest of your life. Something has already shifted inside you. You know it. The transformation is not coming. The transformation has been happening since the first sentence of this video, and what comes next will seal it permanently. Close your eyes for a moment. Not literally, stay with me, but do it in your mind. Close the eyes of the person you were when you pressed play on this video. Close the eyes that saw the world as a place where hard work was enough, where good intentions guaranteed good outcomes, where being open and available and endlessly giving would eventually, inevitably, produce the love and respect and recognition you deserve. Close those eyes, because they belong to someone who no longer exists. The person sitting here now, the person absorbing these words, feeling the weight of recognition settling into their chest like a stone dropped into still water, is different. Not fundamentally different, not a stranger, but evolved, sharpened, recalibrated in ways that will express themselves in every interaction you have from this moment forward. You have undergone a metamorphosis. And what makes this metamorphosis different from the superficial transformations peddled by motivational speakers and self-help gurus is this. It was not built on inspiration. It was built on understanding. Not on the temporary high of an emotional speech, but on the permanent foundation of structural awareness. You do not need to be reminded of what you learned today. You cannot forget it. Because it is not information, it is a lens. And once a lens is placed over your eyes, everything you see is changed, not by effort, not by willpower, but by the simple, irreversible fact of seeing differently. Let me tell you what this means for your life, starting tomorrow morning. You will wake up, and you will move through your routines, the coffee, the commute, the notifications, the obligations. Everything will look the same on the surface. But beneath that surface, you will notice something different. A new alertness, a quiet, steady awareness that was not there before. You will walk into your workplace, and you will see the invisible game playing out in real time. You will notice the colleague who speaks first in every meeting, not because they have the best ideas, but because they are trying to establish the frame before anyone else can. You will notice the person who always sits near the decision-maker, not by coincidence, but by strategic proximity. You will notice the way praise is distributed, the way blame is deflected, the way alliances shift around resources and recognition like currents around stones in a river. And you will not be disturbed by what you see, because understanding removes the sting. When you know why something is happening, it stops happening to you and starts happening around you.
You become the observer rather than the observed, the architect rather than the material. You will engage differently. When someone interrupts you, you will not flinch. You will let the interruption exist in the air for a beat longer than anyone expects, and then you will continue as if it never happened. And the room will notice, not what the interrupter said, but how you handled it.
Your composure will speak louder than any rebuttal. When someone asks you a question designed to extract more than you want to give, you will redirect with the smooth, natural ease of someone who has been doing it for years. Not because you are hiding something, but because you understand that information is currency, and currency is not scattered on the ground for anyone to collect. When someone you care about begins to pull away, you will not chase. You will not panic. You will feel the instinct to pursue. It will still be there. It is human. But you will override it with the deep structural knowledge that pursuit in the face of withdrawal is self-destruction dressed as devotion. You will invest in yourself. You will fill the space with your own growth. And you will wait, not with anxiety, but with sovereign patience, for the dynamic to rebalance itself. These are not behaviors you need to practice. They are behaviors that will emerge naturally from the shift in perception you have undergone today. Because behavior follows understanding the way water follows gravity. You do not need to force it. You need to remove the obstructions. And the obstructions, the old beliefs, the outdated conditioning, the comfortable illusions about how relationships and careers and social dynamics work, have been removed. Not all at once, perhaps. Some will take time to dissolve fully, but the process has begun, and it is irreversible. Now let me bring the 4 laws together into their final, unified form. Because they are not separate principles, they are facets of a single truth, and that truth, stated plainly, is this. The invisible game is won not by the person who does the most, but by the person who understands the most. Not understands intellectually. Understands structurally. Understands in the way that a master chess player understands the board, not by calculating every possible move, but by recognizing patterns so deeply that the right move presents itself without conscious effort. This is what you are developing. Not a set of techniques to be applied mechanically, but a perceptual framework that will guide your instincts in real time, in every interaction, for the rest of your life. The first law, the person who needs less, controls more, is not about becoming needless. It is about building a life so full, so rich, so aligned with your own values and purposes that no single relationship or outcome has the power to destabilize you. When you operate from fullness, every choice you make in the invisible game is a genuine choice rather than a desperate reaction. And genuine choices are felt by everyone around you as the quiet, unmistakable signal of power. The second law, people remember how you made them feel about themselves, is not about performing interest or manufacturing charm. It is about developing a genuine capacity for attention that is so rare in our distracted world that it functions as a superpower. When you listen, truly listen, with your full being, without rehearsing your response, without waiting for your turn to speak, you give people something they are starving for, the experience of being fully seen. And that experience creates loyalty that no strategy can replicate. The third law, emotional sovereignty, is not about controlling your emotions. It is about refusing to let your emotions be controlled by others. It is the quiet, fierce commitment to remaining the author of your own inner narrative, regardless of what the external world throws at you. When you are emotionally sovereign, provocations lose their power, manipulations lose their grip, and the people who once controlled you through your reactions find themselves facing someone who can no longer be moved by their strings. The fourth law, the architecture of mystery, is not about being secretive or withholding. It is about honoring the depth of your own inner world enough to share it selectively, deliberately, and with the awareness that premature revelation destroys the very curiosity that makes human connection magnetic. When you carry mystery, you carry invitation. And invitation is infinitely more compelling than presentation. Together, these 4 laws create something that transcends strategy. They create presence, true presence. The kind that fills a room without raising a voice. The kind that influences a conversation without dominating it. The kind that makes people want to be near you, not because of what you do for them, but because of how they experience themselves in your company. This presence is not something you put on. It is something you uncover. It has always been inside you, buried beneath layers of conditioning that told you to be smaller, louder, more accommodating, more predictable, more available, more transparent than you actually need to be. What this video has done is not add something to you. It has stripped something away. The unnecessary, the counterproductive, the noise that was drowning out the signal of who you truly are. And who you truly are is someone with depth, someone with weight, someone with the capacity to command a room, anchor a relationship, and navigate the complexities of human interaction with the grace and precision of a person who sees what others miss. Machiavelli did not write for the average person. He wrote for the person who was willing to see the world as it is, rather than as they wished it to be. He wrote for the person who understood that clear vision, even when what it reveals is uncomfortable, is infinitely more valuable than comfortable blindness. He wrote for the person who chose sovereignty over sentimentality, awareness over innocence, and strategic clarity over wishful thinking. He wrote for you. And now you carry his legacy, not as a historical curiosity, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a living, breathing, operational framework that will inform every decision you make, every relationship you build, and every room you enter for the rest of your life. But I want to leave you with something beyond strategy, something that Machiavelli himself recognized in his most private moments, in the letters he wrote to friends when the political masks were down, and the human being behind the strategist was allowed to speak. The invisible game is real. Its dynamics are real. Its consequences are real. But it is not all there is. Beneath the game, beneath the power dynamics and the perception management and the strategic positioning, there is something older and more fundamental: the human desire to connect, to be known, to love and be loved, not for the image we project, but for the truth of who we are. The invisible game teaches you how to navigate the world, but it does not teach you how to live. For that, you need something the game cannot provide: the courage to be genuine with the people who deserve your genuineness, the willingness to be vulnerable with the people who have earned your vulnerability, the capacity to set the game aside entirely when a moment calls for nothing but your honest, unguarded, fully present self. The master of the invisible game is not the person who plays it constantly. It is the person who knows when to play it and when to stop playing, who uses strategic awareness to protect their boundaries but refuses to let that awareness prevent them from experiencing the depth of human connection that makes life meaningful. You are becoming that person. Not a manipulator, not a cold strategist, not a paranoid chess player analyzing every interaction for hidden motives. You are becoming a complete human being, one who sees clearly, acts deliberately, and connects genuinely. One who protects their sovereignty without sacrificing their humanity. One who plays the invisible game when the situation demands it and transcends the invisible game when something more important is at stake. That balance, the balance between strategy and sincerity, between awareness and openness, between playing the game and living beyond it, is the final lesson. And it is the one that will keep your transformation from becoming a prison. Because the worst outcome of this video would not be that you fail to apply what you have learned. The worst outcome would be that you apply it so thoroughly, so rigidly, so universally, that you lose the very thing you were trying to protect: your capacity for genuine, unguarded, soul-deep connection with another human being. Do not let that happen. Use what you have learned to navigate the world that requires navigation. But reserve a part of yourself, the deepest, most honest, most alive part, for the moments and the people that require nothing but your presence. Not your strategy, not your awareness, not your carefully managed image, just you, unguarded, unstrategic, unscripted, real. That is the ultimate paradox of the invisible game. You learn it so that you do not need it. You master it so that you can set it aside. You understand power so that you can choose, freely and without fear, to be powerless in the arms of someone you trust completely. And that choice, the choice to be vulnerable not from ignorance but from strength, not from naivety but from wisdom, not because you cannot protect yourself, but because you choose not to with this one person, in this one moment. That choice is the most powerful move the invisible game will ever know. If what you have heard today has shifted something inside you, if you feel the architecture of your perception changing, if you sense the old patterns loosening their grip, then do something right now. Comment below the phrase, "I see the invisible game." This is not a casual comment. This is a declaration, a marker in the timeline of your life. Before this video, you were asleep to the dynamics that shaped your world. After this video, you are awake. And that phrase, "I see the invisible game," is your acknowledgement of that awakening, not to me, not to this channel, to yourself. And by subscribing to this channel, you are doing something more than following a content creator. You are joining a community of people who have chosen clarity over comfort, who have decided that understanding the world as it is, with all its complexity, its hidden dynamics, its uncomfortable truths, is worth more than the pleasant fiction of a world that rewards goodness automatically. Each video on this channel is a new chapter in the education you were never given, a new layer of awareness that compounds over time, a new degree of sovereignty that no external force can revoke. You have made it to the end of this journey, and that alone tells me something about you that most people will never prove about themselves. You are not afraid of depth. You are not afraid of discomfort. You are not afraid of seeing clearly, even when clarity reveals a world more complex and demanding than the one you imagined. That lack of fear is your greatest asset. Guard it, cultivate it, feed it with experience, with observation, with the continuous refinement of the awareness you have begun to develop today. Go now. Walk through the world with eyes that finally see. Notice the invisible threads that connect every interaction. Feel the weight of the game as it plays out around you, in the office, on the street, at the dinner table, in the silence between messages. And know that you are no longer one of the blind. You are one of the few who see. And the few who see do not merely survive the invisible game. They define it. Machiavelli wrote for princes. But the principles of princes live in every person who refuses to be governed by forces they do not understand. You have refused. You have chosen understanding. You have chosen sovereignty. And that choice, made here, in this moment, will echo through every relationship, every interaction, and every decision you make for the rest of your life. Go. And let your silence carry more weight than their words. Let your absence create more impact than their presence. Let the invisible game be your instrument, not your cage. And remember, the most powerful player in any game is the one who decides when the game is over. That player is you. The screen goes dark, but your vision has never been clearer. Use it.